Hi, this is Jill McKnight, and welcome to the Life After podcast, where we talk about moving from surviving to thriving. This podcast is for anyone who wants to learn, grow, and to get tips and tricks about how to inspire you to become the person you want to be and ultimately get exactly what you want in life. This is also the place to be if you want to be lifted up and encouraged to go out and do great work in the world. What has happened in your past does not have to define who you are today or who you want to become in the future. And in fact, what has happened to you in the past should, can, and will shape who you want to become. This podcast is about healing and change, inspiration, and love. It's about bringing people together, connecting all of you, helping you identify where you are in your process. What do you need to feel more engaged and alive in your life? More connected to the people in your circle? What would help you identify how you show up and make changes if your life isn't already exactly the way you want it to be? This podcast is a community of those who are looking to improve our world in the way that is meaningful to them. Why is this important? Because we are at a time when how we show up really matters. Bringing more service, kindness, and love into the world is critical right now.
Our opening quote for this episode is, "The mind and body are not separate. What affects one affects the other." And unfortunately, I don't know who the quote was by. In this episode, we are going to talk about the connection between our mind and our body, the difference between feelings and emotions, an exercise for how to notice the physical impact of your emotions, and a couple of tips on how to manage your emotional states. What is the mind-body connection? Physical health and emotional health are intimately intertwined in what's known as the mind-body connection. Our chemistry and biology impact our mood and emotion, which plays a major role in influencing our stress and physical health. Our thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and attitudes can positively or negatively affect our biological functioning. In other words, our minds can affect how healthy our bodies are. This isn't to say, of course, that our physical discomforts are all mental. Not at all. And I encourage you to always see a doctor if you've got a physical ailment that needs to be addressed. You are a combination of the emotional, physical, and the spiritual. And when something happens in any of these areas, all three are affected. Additionally, it's key to understand that there's a difference between feelings and emotions, although they are often used interchangeably. While we will predominantly focus on emotions in this episode, I want to give you a brief explanation for what the differences are between the two. Emotions are always present, and they are a reaction to our present reality. They're automatic. All emotions are meaningful and healthy until we are taught or conditioned to not deal with or squash them. Unfortunately, ignoring or suppressing our emotions can lead to toxic behaviors and poor mental health. Psychologists Paul Ekman and Wallace Friesen have determined there are 6 universal emotions: happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, anger, and surprise. Other psychologists and neuroscientists would add trust and anticipation to the emotions wheel. Feelings, however, are more specific. They tend to be more conscious to us and happen more quickly because they are reactions to emotional stimulus. Feelings can be extensions of our emotions. They can come from our mental thoughts and can be impacted by the internal stories we've created about the situations in our lives, either in the past or what we anticipate in the future. Most importantly, our environment can influence our feelings and can therefore become habits. I've put a link in the show notes to give a visual of the feelings wheel and how it incorporates our core emotional states. Oftentimes, because we may be unaware of our current emotion, we may not realize what's happening to us without tapping into the physical reaction we're having in our body. Because our emotions can be unconscious, sometimes our physical reaction is the best way to recognize what emotional response we're experiencing. all emotions have a physical connection within us. One example of this is fear. Often we feel fear physically before we recognize the emotional toll it's taking on us. Some ways we feel fear in our body is increased heart rate, faster breathing or shortness of breath, nauseousness, sweating and chills, trembling muscles. If we can learn to identify those physical signs of fear, then we can do something about it. Fear doesn't end up controlling us. We can make a choice, change our mindset, or get some help. Furthermore, understanding how to recognize our emotions based upon the signals in our body can help us process them, feel them less intensely, and help us to feel more grounded or balanced. So, how do you recognize the physical signs of your emotional state? Here's a quick exercise. Practice asking where you feel your emotions. When you are sad, what does that look like for you? For me, sadness means an overall heaviness, coupled with exhaustion, and my eyes hurt too. Maybe for you, it's also restlessness, stomach upset, or general pain. What happens when you experience anger? I feel it in my chest. I get hot, my face turns bright red, and I can feel my whole body starting to gear up for action. How do you feel anger in your body? Maybe you face some of the same things I do, or maybe you start to sweat, your blood pressure goes up, you clench your fists, grind your teeth. What about joy? Where do you feel joy? Is it an overall lightness, a playfulness, or maybe you have more energy? Maybe even there are tears? I invite you to do this exercise with all the core emotions so that you have an understanding of your unique physical reaction to each specific emotion. When you know what's happening in your body physically, you can address, process, acknowledge, and accept the emotion behind it. And if it's an emotion you don't want, once you've identified it, you can feel less of it. Or if it's a positive emotion like joy and you want to feel more of it, you can tap into it physically to expand. Also notice there's a crossover between our emotions and our feelings. For example, we can feel an increased heart rate with anger or fear, which are emotions, or excitement, which is a feeling. Feel free to revisit the feelings wheel in the show notes to see those connections. A great example of this crossover comes from Simon Sinek. He has a video on YouTube, and I've put the link in the show notes as well, about Olympic athletes. After watching the London Olympics, he noticed that journalists consistently asked the athletes the same question. Basically, it was, were you nervous? Are you nervous? Depending upon if it was before or after they had done their event. And almost across the board, the athletes always replied with, no, I'm excited. According to Sinek, what are the signs of nervousness? Your heart races, you visualize the future, and your hands get clammy. And the physical stimulus for excitement? Your heart races, you visualize the future, and your hands get clammy. The elite athletes had learned to interpret what their body was telling them, not as nerves, but as excitement. This is where the mindset comes into it. Sinek goes on to tell that he tried this idea of perceiving a physical stimulus or a sign in a different way than he had previously. He's on a plane, they hit terrible turbulence, and instead of noticing that he's nervous, he decides to tell himself, I'm excited. He's changed his emotional state and subsequent feelings for a more positive reality for himself. How do you choose to perceive the physical signs in your body? When possible, like Sinek does, choosing a perspective that suits you better, feels better, or is simply a more quote-unquote positive outlook can help tremendously. I invite you to try it. Change your narrative. It works brilliantly well. So what does all this mean? It means you want to sometimes tap into how you feel physically so you can identify your emotions more easily. This is beneficial because if you aren't aware of or dealing with some of your more challenging emotions, your body will increase its warning signs to get you to notice that something isn't working in your life. So for example, when I was married, about every 8 to 10 months, I got excruciating back pain. It would appear to have no actual physical basis. The doctors I saw could never really give a reason for my back going out, rendering me unable to do anything physical. Only after I'd taken the prescribed muscle relaxants and pain pills would I start to feel a little better. About 18 months after my ex and I split up, I noticed that I hadn't had a single back incident since the split. And that has been the case for the last dozen years. My body was trying to tell me that something was wrong emotionally. And frankly, as I ignored it, the pain became more frequent and more severe. Now, I'm not saying we don't have legitimate pains. My recent back surgery was from a true physical injury. Just notice that some of our pain can be a physical manifestation of our unwillingness to address our emotions. So, tips and tricks. Here are a few tips to manage your emotions. As a reminder, while it's possible to make major changes in your life at one time, like a light switch going on, more often it is the consistent baby steps, that 1 degree shift or 4% skill set improvement that allows us to make lasting, sustainable, successful change. So, the first tip is to consider that second step of the learning curve, conscious incompetence, where we practice. This will make it easier to identify the physical signs of your body and allow you to process whether you want that emotion to be present. If yes, how can you expand that emotional state? If no, what can you do to shift or change the emotional reaction you're having? Second, the way we use our body to change our emotional state through movement is very powerful. Here are some suggestions. Dance, exercise, breathe, meditate, pray, practice yoga, walk, or do yard work or housework. How else might you like to move? How we move allows us to express ourselves and gives us confidence. Third, continue to develop resilience. People with resilience are able to cope with stress and emotions in a healthy way. Resilience can be learned and strengthened with different strategies. These can include having social support, keeping a positive view of yourself, accepting change, and keeping things in perspective. Feel free to go back to episode number 3 on adversity to get more ideas on building resilience. Finally, your body believes everything you say to it. So watch very carefully both your internal and external dialogue. What you tell your brain believes. This topic is so big that we're actually going to cover it in our next episode. Please reach out to me if you would like some additional support, would like me to come speak to your organization, would like to have your school book me to speak to students, would like to be a guest on the show, or have any feedback you'd like to share. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to today's episode on the connection between our mind and body. Just to recap, we defined what the mind-body connection is, determined that what we feel physically can tell us how we feel emotionally, how we can use that knowledge to change how we are feeling emotionally, and how to follow through with shifting our physical and emotional feelings into more of something we want. Remember that by being aware of the connection between your mind and body, you can manage adversity, build resilience, and connect to your feelings more easily, all leading to a more satisfying life. I appreciate you sharing these episodes. This podcast is a powerful resource for anyone that is looking to make changes in their lives. So please, please, please help me grow by sharing and giving me 5-star reviews. There will be new episodes on the 2nd and 4th Wednesday every month. I promise that every episode I'm going to show up and help support you in your individual journey. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, I've included how to connect with me in the show notes. I'm always open to feedback, so please feel free to reach out to me. You can visit my website at locatecoaching.com to email me your feedback so I can more easily incorporate it into future episodes. Here you will always find critically valuable information, resources, and relevant examples to help you change, heal, and grow. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a fantastic day.